Hello there and welcome to Strawberry Inc. A few weeks back, I discussed the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, I will be discussing the assassination of President Garfield, and later on, of President Lincoln and President McKinley. Therefore, it was July 2nd, 1881, just 2 days before the nation's 105th birthday, 4th of July or Independence Day, when President James Garfield was shot at the Baltimore and Potomac train station in Washington, D.C. That is a wonderful train station I myself have visited. Every 4th of July, rides are free. I recommend you guys to go there if you haven't already. It's made out of sculpture. The shooter was a man named Charles Julius Guiteau, French name. He did not run, he did not hide, and he did not deny it. He had been angry because he kept asking the president to appoint him ambassador of France, but the president kept ignoring him. He stood at the scene surrounded by stunned witnesses and declared, "I am Saul Wart, and Arthur is now president." He had claimed that God commanded him to kill this president. He was arrested on the spot. Guiteau was taken directly to the old DC jail, where he was held in solitary confinement. That same day, Justice Charles James denied him bail just hours after the shooting, and Guiteau was formally charged with assault. It would not stay that way for long. Meanwhile, President Garfield was taken back to the White House for medical treatment. For weeks, doctors probed the wound with unsterilized fingers and instruments. Infection set in, and on September 19th, 1881, more than 2 months after the shooting, the 20th President of the United States succumbed to his injuries. He died in pain and agony. What followed was a national outpouring of grief. Garfield's body was brought to the Capitol Rotunda, where it lay in state from September 21st through the 23rd. His casket, closed and draped in black, was guarded by soldiers and surrounded by flowers and flags. Cabinet members, Supreme Court justices, and ordinary citizens came to pay their respects. Thousands of them. A full military funeral was held on September 23rd, led by Reverend Byron Sunderland, Garfield's longtime friend. President Chester Arthur, now Commander-in-Chief, stood in solemn attendance. The following day, Garfield's body was placed on a funeral train bound for Cleveland, Ohio, his adopted home. Mourners lined the tracks for miles. Some wept, others sang hymns or held black banners. And in Cleveland, over 150,000 people came to see him as he lay in state again at Monumental Park. Me, my mom, and my brother recently visited. There is a big sculpture-looking building, a small building, but it's very well decorated with his image. I recommend that you guys go. You'll even most likely run into tour guides that will explain the whole story to you. And don't only go to visit Garfield's grave. Also, try to look for Rockefeller's grave, the father of the big millionaire who has a tower in New York City. On September 26th, the grand procession made its way through the city, with soldiers, clergy, and veterans guiding the casket to its first resting place, the vault of Lakeview Cemetery, where me and my family visited, by the way. Years later, his body was moved to the ornate James Garfield Memorial on those same grounds. Back in Washington, Garfield's death was changed. Everything for Charles Guiteau. Prosecutor Lee Robinson brought the case before a D.C. grand jury, and the charge was upgraded from assault to first-degree murder. When the indictment was unsealed, it was announced that the death penalty would be sought. Guiteau pleaded not guilty, and on November 14th, 1881, he went to trial. And here is where it got stranger. Guiteau changed his plea to insanity. Lee Robinson, the man who had presented the case to a grand jury, switched sides, joining Guiteau's defense team. In his place, veteran prosecutor Walter Davidge took over, supported by George Corkhill, who came on specifically to dismantle Guiteau's new plea, insanity. Judge Walter Smith Cox allowed Guiteau to change his plea, and so began one of the most sensational insanity defenses in American history. Guiteau's longtime attorney, George Scoville, fought to prove his client was not criminally responsible. But Guiteau did not help his own case. He ranted in court. He insulted witnesses. He even flirted with women in the gallery. It became a circus. Sadly, there were no television cameras back then to capture these moments. It was basically the old-school Darrell Brooks case. On January 25, 1882, the jury returned its verdict, guilty. Judge Cox imposed a death sentence. Guiteau had been in custody since the day of the shooting. He would remain there in the old D.C. jail as his attorneys filed an appeal. It was rejected by the D.C. Court of Appeals in May 1882. Judge Cox also refused to grant a retrial or an acquittal. The execution would move forward. On June 30th, 1882, 1 year to the day since the attack, Charles Guiteau was hanged at the jail. A crowd gathered outside the walls. The press covered every detail. There was no funeral, no church, no mourners. After his death, guards buried him in an unmarked grave in the corner of the jail yard. Later, fearing grave robbers and curiosity seekers, officials exhumed his body. His remains were sent to medical institutions for study. His brain and bones still exist in museum collections today. Guiteau believed that killing President Garfield would make him a hero, that his actions would be seen as divine intervention. But history saw him differently, a madman, an assassin, and a man who died alone, executed behind stone walls. His name is forgotten by most, but the wound he left on the nation is permanent. This is Strawberry Ink. I'm Santiago, and this was the story of Charles Guiteau, the man who killed a U.S. president. Thank you so much for listening. Happy Pride Month, happy summer, and have a good rest of your day.